Chapter 15 of Shipwreck. At Halifax, Flight Lieutenant C. McLean, RCAF, CEF, stood with his hands thrust deep into the pockets of his coat, shivering a little in the wind, which came swooping unresisted up the concrete dock, looked up at the side of the Empire. The rusty steel walls seemed to be impervious to any possible harm, so thick and strong it looked. The Empire had sailed the seven seas for 20 years and more, encountering ice floes and hurricanes alike, and never once giving a thought to striking her colors before anything. Great nets were scooping cargo from the dock and depositing it in the holds to the scream of overworked winches. Here went a plane, boxed for reassembly in France. There went a truck, but these were not important at all compared to the bulk of the cargo. Food. Clay, for the moment, was mused into semi-happiness born of waiting and inaction. For 2 weeks, not one thing had happened around him, not so much as a sprained ankle, and he pondered the possibility that perhaps the aura about him was wearing off. When he had taken a few flights at the Canadian dromes, he had had an observer pushed off on him, and he had been in terror lest that observer reach the dead and in separate chunks. But the observer had kept right on living, and at this astonishing fact, Clay picked up a little heart. Then there was the case of the bridge game, which he had played with the three brother officers that night before. They had thoroughly trimmed the Yank, as they called him, and had been quite jubilant about it. And though he lost over $60, the thing put Clay into such remarkably good spirits that he stood the drinks until 1 a.m. As a former overseas officer, his opinion was much respected, and he had had to hold forth at length on professional subjects. This, too, had served to bolster his confidence in the possible return of normalcy. Man is an adaptable animal, and more so if a soldier. A thought was taking form very gradually, born out of an ardent longing which, at first, he had not dared make known to himself. The desire had been creeping over him all morning, and at first, pushing it aside, he had thought to drown it by keeping it as nebulous as possible. But desires are willful things, and this one squirmed through his consciousness until he found himself turning away from the Empire and passing between the gate guards on his way into town. Not until he entered a drugstore did he realize what he was about, for he had told himself too often that he must not. But for 2.5 weeks nothing had occurred. Perhaps... "Phones?" said the Clay to the proprietor. The man changed the note Clay gave him and directed him to the back of the store. Even now, Clay tried to oppose himself, but the desire was too strong. Within half an hour, he was sailing. Before he went, he had to know. "Long distance, please." And then, "I wish to speak to Miss Laura McLean, New York City." "Personally, sir?" "Personally." The line went dead for him while his call rang out from the city to city. He waited in the stuffy booth, almost able to hear his own heart hammering with his ears as well as his throat muscles. "Would you please give me the address, sir?" Clay gave it. Again he waited. "Laura McLean, sir?" "That's correct." Would you like a report on your call?" "Please," said Clay, instantly alarmed. "A Mrs. Laura McLean is listed in New York at the address you named, sir, but the operator tells me that the phone has been disconnected." "No, that can't be true. Let me speak to the New York operator." And, after a little, "No, sir, we have no other order for connection. The phone was disconnected a week ago. If there is any other party to whom you would like to speak..." "No other party." He dropped the report fee into the box and wandered dazedly out into the street to stand at the curb and stare unseeingly at the lines of trucks which moved by. Suddenly he turned and strode down the avenue toward a telegraph office. Anxiously he wrote out the message. If she had moved because she could not stand the sight of the house, then this would be forwarded to her. Laura, I can be reached care of the American Embassy, London, in 2 weeks. Please communicate. I must know if you are all right. Clay. Down by the sea, a steamer's whistle hooted briefly, recalling him to his orders. For a moment he had a wild idea of dashing for New York, deserting, but he was too good a soldier to do that, and God knew what terrors he would perpetrate if he retraced his steps. He pushed the money across with the message and raced along the street toward his ship, reaching the gangway just before its lines were thrown into the dock. He stood at the rail, looking south and west toward New York, while the heavy engines throbbed and thrust them out into the Atlantic. 4 nights later, with midnight striking its 8 bells in the saloon, a dark figure paused in its restive pacing along the promenade to mark with bitterness the passing of another day. From the rail he could see the dark stretch of sea and the fog-dull stars. He was uneasy, for it had been borne in upon him now what choice bait the Empire was here in the coffin spot of the convoy, and with him aboard it seemed impossible that she would ever reach her destination. Then he had another grief against the sea. Ahead of him in London might wait that assurance for which he yearned. She must be all right. Well, she had to be. He was afraid to trust his luck too far. Twice he had essayed to play cards, but twice he had been able to sit still long enough to no more than start the deal, scarcely glancing at the first hand dealt. He had just left such a game. Voices drifted through the darkened saloon window, and shortly words began to penetrate Clay's consciousness. "Ghastly business getting hurt," said one that Clay recognized as belonging to an Air Force lieutenant. "Hope I shall never have to hop about it on a cane." "If your gunnery doesn't improve, I'll guarantee it," said another. "Come, gentlemen, let's try it cutthroat." "Never saw a chap so jumpy," persisted the lieutenant. "Got his wind up all right." "You mean," said a third voice patiently, "that Clay's yellowing about going back to war? Well, I have never expected shave-tails to show much perspicacity," said the third, droning on. "The thing you're talking about isn't so. He couldn't contact his wife before he sailed, and due to security he won't hear anything until we get to London. It's enough to make any man jumpy." "Really?" said the lieutenant. "Really," mocked the third. "Oh, now," stuttered the shave-tail, I had no slightest idea." Clay shook himself and got away from the window. He roamed along the deck, looking out at the wind-swept sea. A sliver of moon was leaving a pattern of silver on the water, showing up the rushing mountains through which they plowed. The engines pulsed strongly, but at times the Empire thrust her nose deep in and shuddered for an instant while she tried to get free. Habit took him, at last, up the ladder to the bridge. Here a wind shrieked through the rigging and tore at the dodgers, driving the watch officers behind glass. Clay braced himself against the roll and pitch and struggled up against the gale, his coat pushed tightly against him before and bellowing out behind. He turned into the passage behind the house and slipped into the radio room. The operator, a pale youth, trying hard to grow a mustache and hide his age, looked up and saw who it was. The youngster was a little puzzled at the frequent visits of this officer. War forbidding any personal communications of any kind, radio silence reigned. But still the flight lieutenant came here to stare hungrily at the big dials as though they might tell him something. The receivers sizzled for a moment, and the operator picked them up. "They're getting so they don't even send SOSs anymore," he remarked sadly. "Just a blur of S's in their position. This is the Merchant Queen," he jotted down the position. "Weather's calm or down where she is, I guess. Too damn clear. A sub never asked for more. Are our destroyers still with us?" "Where the last time I looked," said Clay. Get so not even destroyers can keep them off. We'd be a good bag for 'em, 5-food ships like us. We'll get through, said Clay. The phones sizzled again, and the youth scribbled on a pad. U-boat shelling them, he says. Poor devil. Must have gotten away from the convoy, said Clay. Convoy can't wait for a ship with a breakdown, even if it can be fixed in an hour or two. Clay gave the operator a package of cigarettes. We'll get through, repeated Clay. He opened the door, and the light lock darkened the shack. He stepped outside, closing it behind him, and picked his way through the dark tangle of cables and bits. Clay went back to the deck for a few minutes. He stood gazing at the silhouette of the ship next in line, fuzzy against the uncertain moonlight. If he could only do something, just to pace around the confined spaces of a ship and wonder, what could have happened to her? Was she dead? Certainly if she were alive, she would receive the message, for she would not move without leaving a forwarding address. The wind reached him, finally, even in his abstracted state, and he went down to the saloon. For a little while he braved the thick smoke and babble of voices, and even tried to engage in the conversation with the munitions salesman. But he kept forgetting what he had started to say, and could not remember what the other had said. He finished off his drink and gave his good nights. Below, he stretched out on his bunk, fully clad. He had not been able to sleep since leaving Halifax, and he was certain that he could not sleep now. But such was his exhaustion that, before he had time to think about it, he drowsed off. After an interval that seemed but the flash of an instant, he felt the ship shudder, and his ears were filled with instantly clamorous sound. He sat up, trying to orient himself, automatically taking down his cap. Sound burst out again, and once more the ship shuddered. Now there was a marked list. Clay reached up in the darkness and opened his black-painted port. He was astonished at the daylight which smote him, for he did not think he had slept at all. Far across a calming sea, he saw a destroyer go tearing along, spewing black smoke and white depth bombs, plowing up the deep like a rat terrier digging out its game. Somebody wrenched open his door, an airman. "All out, sir. Looks like we're sinking." Clay put on his cap. The airman handed him a life preserver, and as they went up the ladder to the deck, helped him into it. Men were pouring out of hatches and streaming up to the boat deck. The few soldiers and officers were standing aside, doing what they could to keep order. Under their feet, the ship gave a sick lurch which placed the port lifeboats into the sea before their falls were even loosened. There was a rush to starboard. Men were diving over the rail and vanishing. Water was in the well deck scuppers now, and deepening. The ship gave another lurch. Boat crews fought to keep the starboard boats away from the side with oars and hooks. An excited seaman released a fall too soon, spilling a score of men into the water. 2 other boats got safely away, though. Clay stood beside the mast. His airman had gone. 2 members of the black gang struggled belatedly out of the ship, seared with steam, carrying a third between them. The Empire was settling by the bow now. Presently, cold water would reach the boilers and blow her midship section apart. Clay had recovered from his first surge of guilt. This was happening in all parts of the Atlantic. Now he smiled a little and steadied himself by holding a donkey handle. The radio men, slipping into their jackets, burst out of their cabin and dived through a place where a boat had been, striking the near water like projectiles because of their life preservers. This, Clay told himself, was the end. The boilers would go and the boiling shroud would suck him down, down, down. A destroyer, leaving her attack on the submarine to her mate, came knifing back, spray geysering on either bow, already getting out her boats. The Empire's stern began to rise out of the water. Clay had to hold to both donkey lever and mast to keep from falling down a hatch forward of him. He felt triumphant. With his whole heart he welcomed the oblivion which reached out to engulf him. Only one flaw marred it. He would never know how Laura met her death. Suddenly, he rebelled. Laura might not be dead, and if he could die, then the hold upon him might be finished. But he would die. He made himself stand where he was. He could not run the risk of being again what he had been. Perhaps he had even brought this upon the poor empire. The stern was 50 feet above the water now. The bow was completely buried. Uneasily, the empire began to vanish, foot by foot, into the sea. First her foredeck, then her wheelhouse, then half her superstructure. If the boilers were ever going to go, a shattering explosion sounded and white steam shrieked to escape. Another blast and another. The whole deck before Clay burst outward. A montage of masts and rails and sky and sea and upset boats passed before Clay's eyes, and then he knew nothing. Nothing but the chill of water, and then the coolness of oblivion. He opened his eyes resentfully upon the eye-beams above him. He closed them again and then, in disbelief, looked around him. He was lying in the scupper of a ship on the half-deck. He propped himself up on his elbow and found that he had unaccountably come aboard one of the freighters in the convoy. Several men were lying there with him on the steel plate, but none of them were so fortunate. Clay felt himself over and discovered that he had not been injured. "Hello," said a sailor, pausing in the bandaging of one of Clay's dripping neighbors. "How do you feel?" Clay didn't answer. He got to his knees and looked at the sea, where destroyers still chased around trying to pick up survivors. "They got blasted, huh?" said the sailor. "He come up and they jolly well ruined the blighter. Hot coffee waiting, and the galley, so." Chapter 16. Of Unsavory Repute. Big flakes of snow were falling on a mucky field somewhere north of London. Looking at the sky was like trying to see through a white-painted window. All day it had been threatening, and now, with late afternoon, the snow had come. Wing Commander Decker paced up and down the tarmac, never taking his eyes from the sky to the north, as though he could pierce the whiteness and find that for which he searched. His thick face was beet color with the cold, and from time to time he paused and beat his gloved hands together. An orderly came from the radio hut and waited respectfully until Decker noticed him. He handed over a yellow slip. The commander read it avidly. A captain came out of the hangar behind the commander, attracted by the cessation of footsteps. "Any word?" "Read that," said the wing commander. An observation plane reported the demolition of the dump 2 hours ago, and we're just hearing about it. Damn it, Forsyth. He must have gotten those bombers through. Why hasn't he come back? If Clay can still fly, he'll come home. Must have been quite a show, what? Show? Who cares about what kind of a show it was if it's done? But after all, said Forsyth, a plane flying 100 kilometers into Germany is bound to get a bit of reception. If Clay got the bombers there, he got them home again. What faith you have in the man, said Decker. I don't understand, said Forsyth. I mean, he's done the incredible before and all that, but he's got 6 of our ships out there and somewhere, and he's jolly well got to get them home. Frankly, old boy, I don't share your enthusiasm for McLean. True enough, they're hanging ribbons on him to no end, but just the same, he's lost 3 bombardiers in the past week and 2 gunners in 2 weeks. The men are getting so they refuse to fly with him despite the things he can do with a plane. Talking with a chap down in East Cheap yesterday, and he knew something about McLean from America. Couldn't say just what. Incredible sort of story. When they ordered him to Hawker Henley light bombers, said Forsyth, he kicked it, remember? Said his work was with pursuit, but with his airline training and all, the brass hats ticketed him with your bombing group. He's howled no end ever since. Just today you heard him begging the bombardier to answer sick call and forget about it. And he never wanted to be a senior flight leader either. Be fair to him. Oh, of course, I know all that, and I know how they're drooling about him. But when I think of the way his flights always get cut to ribbons, why, damn it, man, he might have washed them out to a ship in this soup. Forsyth sighed. If they'd have let me stay as squadron leader, growled the wing commander, I wouldn't have had to sit and wait like this. It's ghastly, men whose lives are depending upon my orders. I thought I heard engines, said Forsyth. Engines? Where's that gun crew? But no. We'd have the alarm if they were ours. Now I hear them. Forsyth. Hawker Henley's, said Forsyth with decision. A shadow flicked beyond the white haze of snow. The field shook under the growing roar of engines. In a moment the motors were still, and wings moaned out of the blackness. The crunch and splash of landing wheels came from far out on the clear expanse. The other planes landed, and blipping engines brought them waddling and churning up to the tarmac. The wing commander ran back and forth excitedly. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4? Where the hell's the other two? Clay got stiffly down from his ship. His face was white, and his fingers, as he tried to unfasten his helmet buckle, wouldn't straighten from their long grip on the controls. Sir, we destroyed the dump as ordered, and returned. Where are those other two planes? Down out of control, sir. We ran into several squadrons of Messerschmitts. I'll make out my report, Forsyth, and there were lines of suffering around Clay's mouth. Would you have someone take Struthers down? He's dead. Another? Cried the wing commander. I couldn't help it, sir. We were trying to get our bombs away, and for the moment we couldn't fight them off, and when I turned around... Commander, you've got to get me transferred to my old arm. I've got to get back to pursuits. 2 ships, your observer, said Decker. He destroyed the dump, Forsyth reminded him. It would be odd if he got everyone back. According to orders, it was worth 6 planes to get ammunition away from behind that fortress. Please, leave him alone, sir. Clay's Batman, all admiration, was waiting to help Clay to his hut. Clay looked back at the 4 bullet-scarred Henleys and then, with a shiver, went toward his quarters. Inside, the Batman gave over a drink. Just sit yourself down, sir, when I get some dry clothes out, and drink that. I'll thaw out your guts, and begging your pardon, sir. Clay sipped the hot drink. His eyes were sunken from the strain of dodging along the Belgium coast and across the channel and picking his way through a blinding fury of snow which had taken them miles off of their course, almost to Paris. The hammering of guns had been so incessant about him that his ears played him tricks and made the noise continue. 3 Messerschmitts, at least, would never fly again. Several companies had been wiped put by the explosion of the dump. The crew of an anti-aircraft battery were being buried with the remains of their gun. He drained the rest of his drink at a gulp and poured another one from the warming pan. As he set the pan back, his eyes rested upon a square of white which stood against a book on his table. What's this? Came for you a while ago, sir, said the Batman, tugging at Clay's flying boots. Clay held it up to the light and then ripped it open. It contained a single sheet, typewritten and without signature. Flight Lieutenant McLean, this is a matter of life and death. When you are next in London, call at the Blue Boar Tavern, room 6. Do not fail me. I have news in which you are vitally interested. Clay frowned over it for some time, at first on the verge of laying it aside and then putting it into his logbook. He had some leave coming after today's work. He had not taken any since his arrival. It was the barest of hunches, but somehow he felt he must call at that address. Did he dare leave this field and his business of death? As though echoing his uneasy thoughts, the low rumble of anti-aircraft repelling enemy bombers brought from the north by the changing wind rattled the snow-smeared window of the hutment. Chapter 17. Of Longing. In London, the snow turned to slush almost as soon as it floated to earth. Trucks lumbered through the soggy streets, throwing out fans of muck to stain the sandbagged walls of a church. People upon the walks close to the old building to avoid the spray glanced now and then at the camions and armored cars which were moving out with the darkness. Laura left the church and stood upon the top of the steps looking at the movement in the street without seeing it. The throb of an engine beat against the town from on high, and she glanced up, instantly interested. During the past week she had become familiar with the planes to some extent, and knew this to be British from the way it crept unmolested across the fading heavens. She moved down into the crowd, again unseeing. As she walked, darkness slowly settled over the city, and soon she was groping her way with the rest, unhelped by so much as a gleam from the blanketed and black-painted windows. At such an hour, the nerves of London began to tauten, and men began to strain their ears to catch the first possible approach of a Nazi bombing fleet. Sandbags barred the way at corners where gunners sat in the dampness about their pieces, talking in low tones and smoking under cupped hands. Close by the rooms she had rented was a cafe much frequented by Air Force officers, snatching a few hours' respite from the constant strain of battle. Here she was in the habit of spending an hour or two in the evening, sitting unobtrusively at a table by the back wall, drinking a little wine and watching each soldier that came in. As she entered, two officers bowed politely toward her. At first they had made advances, and when these had been quietly repulsed, had had to content themselves with nodding and then speculating as to who she was and why she was there. Men rarely became drunk here in the noisy sense, for the old Cockney woman who ran the place was strong of arm and much opposed to any violence not of her own manufacture. She came up now to seat Laura at her usual table and talk to her. "How's yourself this evening?" said the woman. "I'll bring a pint of arf, and arf if it ain't to be unladylike for you. Might sit you up." "Thank you," said Laura. "You have not." "No, the Canadian officers that came in this evening didn't contain one of them, not a flight lieutenant in the lot." She went away. Laura looked at the group near her. These men were all bombardiers and observers, all young and well started upon their evening. Without being noticed, she sat on the other side of the table so as to hear a little better. She often did this, but seldom was rewarded as she was this night. She had heard Clay's name mentioned many times before, usually in terms of praise. "I tell you," said a lieutenant in a wobbly voice, "if I ever get assigned to his outfit, I'll take it bingo over the hill. I didn't come to this war to be bopped off by a hoodoo." "You're balmy," said another. "Any man that can do what he's done is certainly no hoodoo. 21 planes in just about as many days, and he's not even pursuit. I'd give a lot to have even a third of that record." "He's a hoodoo," pouted the young lieutenant. "Look," said the third with a pink complexion, "just because he's lost a few bombardiers is no reason to say that. Look at the assignments they gave the poor blighter. Why, if I was Lieutenant McLean, "You'd be a blasted hero," said the first, "and you'd go on winning the war all by your lonesome and losing more men than can be listed by the Ministry of Information." "I tell you, he isn't that kind of chap," said the pink-cheeked lad. "I met him once, in Montreal, prince of a fellow, sort of melancholy, like he knew his number was up, but a prince just the same. It works this way. Man shows some nerve, and so the brass hats slip him all the hot work. He can't come out of it without losing something." "Losing something," sniffed the first. "I've kept a tally on him, I say. I've chalked them up. Every flight that goes out with him comes back shot up, and half of them not at all. He's a hoodoo. He's lost 18 planes around him since he's returned to the front." "But it isn't his fault," said the pink-cheeked one, getting excited. "They send him halfway to Berlin to blow up a train or a road, and, of course, half the crowd-eaters along the line jump on his outfit. He's heading the aerial shock troops, and as for me, I'd take my chances on being his bombardier." "Some men," said a fourth, "have an awful low opinion of their own lives. He lost an observer yesterday. An observer and 2 Henleys. He's nothing but a glory hog, and Jonah to boot." "You'll take that back," said the pink-cheeked youth. "To hell with you," said the fourth. Chairs and the table and drinks went over with a shattering crash. The madam swooped out from behind her bar and soon had an officer in each hand, leading them to the door. She swept the light blankets away and pitched them out, and then, turning, glowered at the room, but no objection being offered to the act, she was soon her smiling self again. Laura sipped the warm drink, looking intently at the 2 remaining Canadians, but they did not open up the discussion anew. She had heard much in roundabout ways about Clay here in London. It spoke much that her own connection with him was the only thing which had let her reach London at all. That and her swearing that the Red Cross in London could not get along without her. He had twice been decorated according to the papers since she had reached England. The landlady brought her some soup and an omelette and almost ordered her to eat. "It's a fine thing to wait for a man, but take my word for it, miss, they like him a little bit on the plump side, and gor, you can't go on losing it like you have for the last few weeks." Laura ate a little, her eyes more upon the door than upon her plate. Soon a strange feeling began to come over her, and obeying an impulse she could not explain, she put some sixpences upon the table and left. Before the room entrance of the Blue Boar Tavern stood a mud-splattered motorcycle, its wing insignia almost hidden. She sped up to the stair toward her rooms, and there, beyond the dim lamp in the hallway, she saw him, knocking. He turned toward the sound of her footsteps. He was too stunned by her presence there to say anything. She ran to him and clutched his shoulders. For a second they stood, thus not uttering a word. Something was pulling him away. "I didn't know," he breathed at last, twisting his cap and staring down at it. "I wouldn't have come if—" "Just for a moment," she pleaded. "No, no, I cannot. Clay!" And she looked tearfully into his eyes. "Clay, don't you understand that it is more difficult for me to be away from you, lost to you, than to face a small thing like the chance of being killed? You shouldn't have come. I had to come. I knew where you would go. I called Montreal the day after you left." "But how could you come here? How was it possible?" "Anything is possible to the wife of such a famous soldier. You're soaked through. Come in and let me get you some coffee, some real coffee. I've been saving some." "You didn't sign that letter. I didn't know." "You wouldn't have come had you known. Just for a minute, Clay, please." Gently, she forced him through the door. He stood there with melting snow dripping from his shoulders. Pretending that it made work to dampen the rug, she took his coat from him, and when she found his tunic was wet, that too. She pulled a bell cord and stepped into the hall to hand them to the porter with orders to dry them. Coming back, she pushed him to a chair and finally overcame his reluctance to part with his muddy flying boots. These, too, she sent away with the porter, telling him to hurry and get them clean, but winking broadly at him not to. She put a drink in Clay's hand and then hurried to the small butler's pantry, from which came sounds of preparation from time to time. Clay looked around him. It felt good to be in a warm room after that long, wet ride over bomb-pocked roads. His eyes rested here and there upon small objects which spoke of Laura from other days in New York. Gradually, the warmth of the drink and a treacherous feeling of well-being began to seep into him. She came in with a tray and made him sit at the table. Indifferent food had been his lot for so long that the aroma of fresh and well-cooked steak and crisp toast and coffee made him realize how famished he was. Little by little, he knew his defenses were breaking down. "You should never have come," he repeated over his coffee. "But I had to bring you your field equipment and your uniforms. You walked right off and forgot them, just like you forgot me." "I didn't. I couldn't ever forget you. You know that." "And yet you are sorry I came." "I'm being a traitor to myself. I've no right." "Clay?" "Yes?" Every person should have some small right in the manner of his or her death. Am I right? Well, yes. Then I am choosing. I won't leave you again. I'll stay here or nearer to your drome, and if you do not come to me whenever you can, I'll go to you. To me? But a bombing squadron? You have my word for it. I am Mrs. Clay McLean, and Clay McLean is a name that opens all doors. I don't care if I die. If you love me at all... He reached out a hand and snatched up hers. Laura, you know. She brightened and came close to him. Do you, Clay? Yes, forever. She took his napkin and wiped a tiny dab of gravy from his mouth and then kissed him. He felt himself losing and then knew that he was lost. All his effort, all his resolution, lost in the vibrant darkness. Chapter 18. Of Victory. The window of the hutment rattled until it seemed that it would be shattered. The window of the hutment rattled until it seemed that it would be shattered. The Heinies were blasting the field near the village. The far-off rattle of machine guns told of night interceptors. Pieces of mud came pattering down from the ceiling, and the single electric bulb quivered. Even the bed shook with the waves of concussion which rolled along the ground. Twice tonight, klaxons had made the aerodrome leap to its defenses and snatch up its masks. Twice, raiders had been driven off. Clay, writing at an ammunition case desk, had not bothered to do the bomb-proof. He had a little pile of wadded-up paper about him, and even then picked up what he had written and tore it across. How could he keep her from killing herself? How could he fight down his own treacherous desire to go to her, knowing as he did that it was only a matter of time before something happened to her? A knock sounded, and at his call a hand swept back the curtain, and Forsyth stepped in, carefully light-blocking the doorway behind him. Clay motioned toward a place on the bed, and Forsyth, looking around, sat down. Clay gave him a cigarette and waited for him to speak. Going to the cemetery in the morning? Clay winced. He hated to think that these bombardiers were dead, much less to know that he... Yes, he said dully, I'll go. I'm assigning Simmons to you tomorrow. You? Simmons? Yes, Clay, I'm in command. But how? I didn't see you in the bomb-proof. No, shrugged Clay. And yet we lost 6 men a little while ago. It was pretty bad, Clay. Clay turned a little white. Decker was blown up. That's why I'm in command. Who else? You're Batman, Clay. Clay's hands shook a little as he poured them out 2 drinks. That's the 5th raid this week, isn't it, Forsyth? Yes. Forsyth, why don't they put me back in pursuit? Because you're too valuable in the light bombers. You bear a charmed life, old fellow, and if you can wipe out enemy positions, to the devil with mopping up enemy planes. Don't send Simmons with me tomorrow, said Clay. Why not? How the devil can one man... I'll manage. I don't want anybody with me tomorrow, do you hear? I'll never fly with another man in my plane as long as I live. 9 men, 9 of them have been shot to pieces a few feet from me. Can't you understand? 9 men that didn't have any right to die. And now Decker, my commanding officer, and my poor old Morris, my dog robber. Next it will be you or Thompson or even my wife. Steady, old boy. I've held it in too long now. I can feel myself cracking to pieces underneath it. You don't know, Forsyth. You don't know what I am. You're a damn good pilot. I'm what they call an accident prone. Everyone's connected with me and they die. We've lost 2 COs here. We've lost 32 men in raids. We're shy a dozen ships and pilots in a week. And now Decker and Morris. Next it will be you or Laura. I don't understand, said Forsyth. An accident prone? I don't get it. Any insurance company will tell you what it is. I can't get killed. That's why I've collected these damn medals. That's why I'm filthy with glory. I can't be killed. Forsyth forced a drink into his hand. War does strange things to a man, Clay. You've been thinking too much and drinking too little. Others that have lost almost as much as we have, except that we get all the dirty work. Brace up. You still don't get it. If you did, you'd never let yourself be near me again. We've been friends since we first started in this war together, and yet the risk you run in knowing me is greater than any risk from bombs or bullets. He was quiet after a little, and his voice was controlled when he spoke again. I've got a wife. I ran away from New York and came back here just to put her out of the way of danger. She's in London. I'm out of my head, wondering what will happen to her. Easy does it, said Forsyth, getting up. Forget such tommy rot. Drink yourself into a good sleep, all brighter with the dawn. Clay looked for a long time at the blanket under which Forsyth had left. He turned again to his writing paper, but now he could not think of a word to say. Wearily he lay down and snapped off his light by pulling the string to it. Perhaps another raid would come, and this time bombs would tear this hutman to bits, and himself with it. But that, he told himself, was too much to hope for. It was still very dark when he came into semi-consciousness. He had a peculiar feeling that he had lost his earthly weight and floated now several inches above the bed. The sensation was not unpleasant, though slightly mystifying when he discovered that he was able to raise and lower himself at will. Suddenly he knew why it was that he was able to do this. He knew where he was going and why he had to go there. For how long had he hoped for just this chance? Eagerly then he rose and found the night without wind or sound. He had the troublesome idea that he ought to be able to see the shimmer of the sea in the moonlight. There was nothing. For a little while he went onward without any sense of direction whatever, and then it was as though he had picked up a pilot, for he turned upon his course and sped away toward a destination of which he was certain. Before long he began to see a white glow in the distance. Gradually it materialized into walls, all angular and standing upon nothing, and then, coming closer, he saw the black square, which was the gate. He had been so certain that there had been someone with him that now, standing before the portals and finding they did not open, he was surprised to discover how completely alone he was. He advanced, a little fearful that he would be unable to knock, but when he struck the coarse surface, the racket gratified him. Slowly the doors swung back. Two things in helmets there facing him without faces. He stepped forward into the reddish confines of the place. Nothing had changed. The constant harsh sound was still to be heard. The floor was hard to walk upon and of ghastly red. He went forward down the corridor, which increased in size, and at last found himself in the great cavern. The yellow chair was empty, and he cried out for an audience. His voice was very small and went bowling back and forth like a pebble.
"So, you have come back,"
said a grating voice before him. The presence had come into the ugly yellow chair. "I came back to see you, to plead with you, to remove the anger you put about me." The presence leaned forward and beckoned him nearer.
"I put no anger about you."
"But when I ran away..."
"Oh, I know you now. Clayton McLean, I think. My memory is very good, is it not? For I have many, many like you."
He thought it over for a moment.
"But I do not recall ever having had one come unbidden before."
"I came for my release," said Clay. "I have glutted your belly with destruction and death. All about me men and women have died, and I was powerless to stop it."
"To stop it? When you yourself did it?"
"I despise this existence."
"What? Despise it when it gives you immunity, when it wards off all harm and gives you much more luck than you have ever had before in all your life?"
"I care nothing for the immunity or the luck. I shall take care of those things myself. Before you summoned me, I was able to get along."
"Wounds and all, eh? How unappreciative you are. I went to the trouble of mending you. I even let a certain physician live beyond his time to heal you. And even though I ran a chance of having him heal others and make them happy.
I must be released, said Clay doggedly.
Surrounded by the instruments of destruction, and you want to resign. There's the wisdom of a man for you.
I can take care of those. Everyone about me dies. I can no longer go on.
Even with fame and luck?
Even with fame and luck.
You are certain about this?
Yes.
Clayton McLean, you have given me more than most of my servants. I dislike exposing you to what I will if I release you.
I still wish it.
Well, sighed the presence, I cannot refuse after such faithful service. Very well, Clayton McLean, you are released. But I, who have such a poor opinion of man, am curious as to what motives prompt you.
Forget the motives. I thank you for this release and trust that it is final.
Indeed it is.
Thank you.
Wait, don't go for a moment. I must know what brought you all this way. That's rare courage.
After you took me for yours, said Clay sharply, I fell in love with a woman who is now my life. If I go on as I have, sooner or later she will die.
Ah, Laura Grant, now Laura McLean.
You know of her?
Certainly, said the presence. When she married you, she became part of your immunity and luck. She, therefore, could not be destroyed. But go, I have released you.
Wait! You mean she was never in danger? And that perhaps something will happen to her now?
Yes.
But you mustn't let it. I came here just for that.
All right. I'll protect her. Now go.
Clay shouted for joy. He raced up the corridor and past the guards and out into the endless void. Free! Free! He was free. Chapter 19. Of Eternal Darkness. In the canteen next morning, several flight officers were shaking dice, waiting for the order to take off. Clay stood at the bar. The flights were a little puzzled by Flight Lieutenant McLean this morning, for they had been used to a sober, unsmiling fellow, and now he was jubilant, laughing with everyone over nothing. Forsyth watched him and felt better. Feeling good today, eh, Clay? Said dawn was always the brighter. Fine. Never felt better, said Clay. He finished his scotch and stepped over to the gambling table in time to intercept the dice. The gamblers were puzzled, for he had not offered to join them ever before. Pleased, they surrendered the box. 3 crowns, said Clay, putting them out. They covered the bet, and he threw. When the cube stopped rolling, they read a 1 and a 2. Crap! Clay seemed to be more pleased about it than a man who had just lost should be. But he threw a handful of silver upon the board and tossed the dice again. Boxcars, cried Clay, jubilant, all out of reason. Having lost a second time, he threw down a 10-pound note, which was covered. Again he tossed the dice. 8, said the gamblers. Clay threw a 7 instantly and lost both money and dice. He laughed happily and backed away. To Forsyth's questioning look, he replied, You wouldn't get it, but I can lose. I can lose, I tell you. A runner came, all splattered with mud, and handed Forsyth a message. You can win, too, said Forsyth. Look at this. Clay read it and then whooped for joy. To Spitfires! I'm to be put back on Spitfires! Simmons breathed a sigh of relief to himself and drank his drink. Then I'll take off, said Clay. I can have a ship, can't I? Loughton should give you one. He's got 3 men in the hospital. Spitfires, said Clay, hurrying out toward the hangars. A few minutes later, he was getting into his flying suit, grinning at his astonished Batman. Clay sat down before his desk and, letting his flying boots be put on, scribbled a few lines. Laura, darling, it's all right. It's finished. I can look the world in the eye once more. Tonight I'll get to London somehow. I love you, Clay. He addressed the envelope. Make sure you mail this."
"Yes, sir,"
said the Batman. Clay loped out to where a Spitfire was warming on the line. Loughton yelled in his ear, "Patrol Sector 7 and keep out any photography planes. If you need support, howl for it." "You bet," said Clay. He crawled into the pit and gunned the engine, glorying in its savage snarl. Like a javelin of light, he streaked down the muddy field and up into the blue. An hour later, above Sector 7, Clay cruised at 10,000 feet, not shivering at all in the icy air. Below the roads, teeming with transport, snaked patternlessly, but all leading to the docks. There was invasion in the offing, which was why no photographers should be let through. Clay whistled a tune, which was lost in his slipstream, and kept his eyes open. Presently in the north he caught a flash of wings. He sat up and eyed the spot for some time. Shortly he did not need glasses to tell him that 3 flights of enemy aircraft were bent upon getting good plates of this activity. He snapped on his radio. "Calling Field 29. McLean calling Field 29. 3 flights of planes coming over Sector 7. McLean, you've got some licensers coming up. Be with you in a few minutes. Can you mess it up until they get there like a good fellow?" "Sure," said Clay. He could identify the planes now. They were Junkers 87. They could fly him ragged while they strafed the roads below. Damn infantry for moving in daylight. "Calling Field 29. Calling Field 29. Hello? These are Junkers 87, about to strafe the roads." "Well, mess it up. The Lystanders are streaking for you this minute." "Okay," said Clay. He cleared the throats of his 8 guns and banked to climb above the advancing ships. Already one flight was diving down on the carpet. The top flight was waiting for Clay. Clay looked around for the Lysanders and failed to find them. He shrugged and climbed to meet the top flight. It was a foolhardy and gallant thing to do. He would not have been started on this patrol unless he had insisted. To spot these fellows should be enough. But he vaulted up into the sky and centered his right sight on the lead plane and let drive. He almost rammed it, for it burst into flames directly ahead of him. He went by in a flash, and then abruptly his cowl was full of holes. Wildly he verticaled to get out of the fire of the other 2 ships, but the second flight was coming up, and suddenly they were ahead of him, raking him as he flashed across them. He strove to get his sights on one, and then his own plane quivered, stricken. The smell of gasoline was acrid in his nostrils. His engine quit, and he went into a steep dive. But the Junkers were built for diving. They were all about him, all firing at him in turn, methodically smashing him to bits. Flames streaked back into his face, and he fought to get out of his cockpit. His arm went numb, and then his side. The wind was breaking his back. Somehow he managed to fall free. Angrily he tried to reach his ripcord, but his right arm would not obey. He could not bend his left arm. Junkers, his burning ship, the roads below, and the smoky sky all blurred and whirled in a mad cotillion. He looked at his ripcord. It did not release, and in those last few shrieking seconds of life, he understood. He was free. And Laura, the god had said he would protect her, and the god did not protect those who did not serve. Savagely he strove to reach that ring. Laura, oh God, what had he done? There was blackness. Chapter 20. And Laura? Laura gripped the letter in a nerveless hand. She could not cry. Her eyes felt hot and dry, but an hour before she had received another letter. "I can look the world in the eye once more. Get to London somehow. I love you." And now the words, all the more horrible because they tried to sympathize, which had almost stuck in Forsyth's shaking pen. "In action, a brave and gallant officer. We shall miss him. All England will mourn with you." Somehow she got down the steps. She did not know where she was going, but she felt she must move about or suffocate. She went slowly up the street. Suddenly sirens wailed about her, and people rushed towards bomb-proofs. Anti-aircraft began to wham throughout the city. Laura stood where she was at the corner. A shrill and rising scream ate down the sky. Masonry and thunder buffeted the walls on either side of the street. Other screams, terrifying to hear, racketed through the town. Close behind Laura, a bomb lit squarely upon a bomb-proof, blowing it and its people into oblivion. 100 feet up the street, a man dived for the entrance to a cellar and did not make it. Laura stood where she was, hopefully watching dark dots grow bigger high above, and then avenging flights swarmed across the sky and drove the evening raiders off, and the city gradually stilled. Laura, not yet understanding, stared at the death all about her. The End of Death's Deputy by L. Ron Hubbard. This has been a one-take audiobook production. Goodbye.